Hey, everybody. So, gosh, it's Sunday, January 27th, 26th, 2025. Gosh, I have just had so many like thoughts and things swirling through my head. I need to go do some kind of productive workish things, but I was like, let me make a quick video because I'm just feel like I need to get some stuff out of my system. So I just put up this as the screen share Make America Think Again. This was a blog that I started right after Donald Trump got elected in 2016, and to write about like gaslighting and stuff based on him being such a narcissist. And I haven't done a ton of stuff on it, but I have done some articles. And I was watching something earlier and thinking how that's right. This is what I think I want to talk about. Okay. And thinking about how the gaslighting, God, who could have possibly thought? Sorry, I'm digressing, but who could have possibly thought back then that we would be where we are now and it would have played out this way? It's kind of unfathomable on some weird level. But I was watching a YouTube video earlier, I think, of Jessica Denton, who has gone off on her own after being with Midas Touch, and I have utmost respect for her and the people who are not willing to support um the stuff with the mainstream media where they're just not like digging into the deeper kind of stuff. So I have mad respect for her. And she's been hosting people who have very credible information about potential election being stolen and stuff like that. So anyway, but there were some things she was talking about, and I started thinking this is all interconnected with the gaslighting stuff too, because there's a way in which, like back in 2016 and back in 2020, when there were all of these, people that we kind of called like crazy election deniers, saying, there's no evidence that the election was stolen. And I don't think that there is any evidence that the election was stolen in 2020. And there was a lot of due diligence done on all those lawsuits that um, the Trump people put out. But so many of the people who were going on about that were coming from this weird, like kind of crazy place of like, to me it felt very like not rational, because it would be like, well, in Arizona there was this Sharpie pen and they told the Republicans not to use it, or whatever the specifics. I wrote a blog article actually about that stuff back in 2020, which is on this blog if you want to read it. However, a lot of the things they were saying just came from this like vitriolic, like da 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 da, and this specific thing means that the election was stolen. And so again, there was a lot of due diligence. There wasn't anything proving that it was. There were all these lawsuits, etc. So the starting point to me was very different, and the whole way it was like managed and the energy behind it, right? Of people just being like, this means this period, where it doesn't. And like, hey, if somebody would have found out that those things actually happened and there was election interference, that's a different story. But they didn't. Okay. Now fast forward 4 years, and there's a lot of like credible security experts and like network internet, I'm not going to come up with the right words necessarily, but like people who are experts in election security from the perspective of like how the information from the machines is uploaded and all of that stuff. So there is some credible information, and they're looking at patterns that show that there's a good chance that some things were right. But again, people like me who, and I do believe that there needs to be a lot more in-depth looking into this, but I'm not coming at it like, oh, it's an absolute that she lost. No, or that she won. I'm not saying that. Like what I'm saying, and I think most of the people who are looking into it are saying that there's enough weird stuff that's being uncovered by credible sources that this does need to be looked into. And it doesn't really even have anything to do with Kamala specifically. A lot of it has to do with like the groups that are doing this. Most of them are nonpartisan. It's all about free and fair elections. So that's a different baseline starting point. But I think, and I'm taking forever to get to my point about gaslighting, sorry. But I think how this has to do with gaslighting is that there's a way in which since back in 2020, this narrative was so MAGA, people that a lot of people think are like crazy and not rational and all that, that that was such the group that did it, that those of us who aren't in that camp were like really nervous about even saying, oh, this might not have been correct. And there's a way in which, over a long period of time, the kind of like energy from the gaslighting over a period of years, this is one of the potential impacts of that, right? Because you get all this attention on all this craziness, and then things shift. And then the people who are like, okay, we're actually finding information that indicates this may have happened, but we don't want to look like those crazy people. So my point is that all of that stuff that's been happening over the last 4 years has kind of dampened people to where they're like, okay, I don't necessarily want to talk about it because I don't want to even bring up the possibility or bring up, say something like, oh, maybe our elections aren't as perfect as we thought they were. And then you've got all these crazy people from both, see, we told you back in 2020 that that's what happened. That's not what happened. And both things can be true, but there's a way in which just all of this energy and all of this focus and all this negative stuff over all these years gets people in this state of like, we've all been traumatized by it. You're like, oh, wait, I can't, wait, this feels like something that needs to be looked more into, but I don't know if I even want to talk about it because people are going to think I'm crazy, just like those crazy MAGA people. So all I'm saying, I don't have an answer, is that I feel like this is a lot of the stuff we're dealing with. And when you're talking about kind of gaslighting, this makes sense that this is one of the kind of impacts of really long term being gaslighted endlessly. Okay. And then it does get to a point where the people in power, the elected officials, even on the Democratic side, a lot of people are super pissed off and disappointed, and I don't blame them because you're like, dudes, when are you going to actually stand up for this deeper truth? Like, and I get it. Like, I have an education in public policy. I know how this stuff works. And I get like when you're in these positions, you do have to be careful about how you do things. And you want to be as sure as you possibly can before you put something out in the public, that because people will interpret things in all kinds of crazy ways. Like, I have empathy and compassion for what policymakers are going through. I really do. But there's a point where you're like, okay, you can't just let this potential truth like not be uncovered, right? Because you don't want to scare people about maybe the reality that our elections are not as safe and secure as we thought they were. So I hope that people will start thinking about that and thinking more broadly. I mean, for years I used to always watch like MSNBC, and I'm a huge fan of certain people on there. Like I love Rachel Maddow. I like Lawrence. I love Joy Reid. Actually, I even like, I always like, I got where I like Nicole Wallace, which is funny because when she was a Republican, I did not like her at all. And then, after Trump got elected, I got where I really did like her. In fact, it's funny. I can, in some ways, over the last 4 years, I've gotten where I watch more of the former Republicans who were like against Trump because there's something about the way they have this kind of view of like they're more conservative, which I'm not. And somehow they're able to like frame stuff to me that feels more like kind of rational and normal across the continuum. So anyway, I digress again. But I guess my point is, what is my point? I guess my point is that even I have stopped. I have not watched any mainstream MSNBC, any of that since the election, because I'm so angry at how I feel like that the mainstream media, and I get, it's probably because they're like corporations that want to make money. mostly. It's like they just equalize so many things that are not equal that I'm like, no, I don't have any faith in anything you guys say anymore. I'm totally done. So I just feel like now it's really up to the people. And there are lots of organizations that are doing stuff like the Democracy Forward and even like Mark Elias, the who does I think the Democracy Docket, and like the people who are on the ground really starting to look at like really uncovering the information and digging deeper and stuff because that's not what the mainstream media is doing. They're just putting out like getting upset about specific things and scaring everybody. And it's all scary. I'm not saying they're wrong, but it's just I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not watching that stuff because one, it just keeps people potentially in a state of lower vibration. And it's this constant like, oh, this and looking all these different ways. And I'm like, no, I don't think that that's healthy for us moving forward. So I think what I'm trying to say here is just getting some stuff off my chest and starting to think about, I hope people will, and I will write some blog articles about this. I hope people will start thinking about um, ways to really look at ways to take action, but not get triggered and caught up in every specific thing. I think I want people to start to learn how kind of policy works. Let's educate people about how policy works and train them to understand that so people can work together. And then maybe this might sound kind of crazy, but even starting to think about how people can learn what kinds of potential lawsuits they might even have to stand up against this on like an individual level. Because I just feel like we're at a point where we're going to have to do a lot of this stuff from the really grassroots power to the people starting point. And I'm not like um I'm not a conspiracy theorist and I'm not like I hate all the government. I'm not saying that at all. Policymakers do what they do. People in political positions, they live in a world of that system is very complicated to try to get anything done. I'm not criticizing them. No. What I'm saying is that it's going to get much bigger than that, I feel. And so on the very grassroots level, we're going to have to organize ourselves and working with already existing organizations. I'm not saying like we're all alone and nothing's being done, but start working together that way. And so that we can even, that can actually help support even like elected officials in the positions they're in. Because there is a way, I think that we can all be a little kind of naive about things because we just think, well, that's my legislator. They have to do this, or this, or if I demand this and this doesn't make sense. And the truth is, they work in very complicated systems themselves and like what they have to go through to get legislation passed, to get legislation started. There's a lot of things that are really complicated. So I feel like people on the ground, like we need to take back our power and we really need to start learning how all of this stuff works and do stuff ourselves, like get stuff rolling. And I mean, people themselves can file legislation. There's all kind like there's no thing that says a group of people can't file something. So we have to decide what to work on and we have to get really clear and discerning about the things that we choose to work on and really get people in local areas to understand even how government works better so that they have a better idea of the actions that they can take that are more likely to actually make an impact. I really believe that. So anyway, I just yeah, just felt like, oh, I've got to like get on and say some words and there you have it. But everyone, hey, also the other thing is like just kind of more from a motivational and like taking care of ourselves mode. Um, I mean, stuff's going to trigger us. This shit that they're trying to do is so crazy. Like, I get it. It's be really hard not to be reactive, but I would suggest when we have reactions to stuff to try to like, okay, okay, I'm upset, I'm scared, I'm angry, like feel the feeling. You don't need nobody needs to like stuff their emotions. That's probably part of why we're in the mess we're in now, because the mental health in this country is atrocious and people have just stuffed their emotions for 50 years. Um, so feel the feeling, breathe, but then try as much as you can to not let it like settle into your bones, as they used to say. Try not to let it take over too much. And remember to try to stay focused on the light moving forward, because there is a way in which staying immersed in all this heavy negative stuff, not that it's not true and scary, but that doesn't help move things forward in a positive way. So even while we're going through all this craziness, like as much as possible, try to shift back into the light as much as you can and keep moving toward that, because there is always things that can be done and like still have fun. I was just watching something funny on like YouTube or something, cracking up. And actually, we can have fun, like making fun of like the stupid things that people are doing during all of this. Like, I think that's a really good strategy too, to just like totally lambaste the idiotic things that like Trump supporters do, and that even like public people do, and newscasters like, listen, it's if there's a time, like do it, like laugh, dance around, be funny. And, and the truth is, like, I think the more progressive and people who are more liberal minded, we're just better at that and funny. Because I notice, like, when the like right wing nationalists, like, their energy's so just like heavy and nasty that it's just not even funny. They don't even know how to have fun because it's all about like control and all this weird stuff where, I mean, people I know who they could be hilarious, just like laughing and making fun of stupid stuff and all that. So, anyway, that's my rant for today. Hang in there, everybody. We'll get through it. I mean, lots of people have been through lots of really hard times, so we'll get through it. It's sad that we're here, and I wish we weren't, but we are where we are. All right, talk to everyone soon. Oh, and this was kind of like, was this divinely inspired? I just scrolled down on my blog. Anyway, I can't imagine that anybody doesn't know what gaslighting is after it's been such a term that's been talked about for the last 7, 8 years. But for those who would like to learn more about it, if you don't know, it came from the term from this movie called Gaslight, starring Ingrid Bergman. It came out in the 1940s and gives you a basic understanding. So hey, if you're so inclined, get that movie and watch it. Plus, it's just like a really good movie, but it really does illustrate gaslighting, because it's basically gaslighting is basically someone trying to convince you that what you're seeing with your own eyes is not real. Okay, that's the simple thing. And it's a movie about a husband who gaslights his wife into trying to make her think that she's crazy. So there you go. Anyway, have a great rest of your day. Again, today is Sunday. January 26th, 2025. This is the Grant Geek Diva. And as I always say, you don't have to get it perfect, but you do have to get it rolling. And that definitely feels apropos with the stuff we're working on now. We just need to get some things rolling and see where they go. Blessings to you. Bye bye.